Hello everyone, this is Jacob Popia, the producer of The Apex. After many requests from you, the JJD family, Jan and RJ are going to start a different type of episode where they sit down and discuss the JJD blog post in depth. This episode is titled, Be a Swiss Army Knife. Please subscribe and hope this pushes you toward your apex. One last thing before I go. Be sure to listen to the end before you go and hear about our special partnership with Envision Clothing Company.
Hello, Apex Chasers. Welcome to another episode of the Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Jan Almasy, and always seated across the table from me is Mr. R.J. Holiday.
What's up, everybody? Glad to be back.
As you always are. Mm-hmm. It is a beautiful, beautiful
Any
day.
day.
RJ hooked me up with some muffins this morning, so if you hear some chomping in the background, it's because I'm continuing to eat my muffin because it's a delicious
I inhaled
icing-covered
mine already. I got it
blueberry
out of the way.
muffin. I'm surprised that you didn't, choke on it. You ate that thing quick.
I also had two bagels.
What,
on the way
what
here,
flavor
too.
did you have?
Pistachio and banana nut.
I didn't even know that they made pistachio
Dude, they're
muffins.
good. They're real good.
I'll have to try that. Get out of my comfort
They
zone.
have a butter rum one, too. That's actually really good.
Buttered rum.
Not too bad.
That also sounds
They had
delicious.
they had a new one there at Bueller's. It was a wildberry.
Wow. Like the wild thornberries?
What was that little kid's name?
Donnie?
Donnie. Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, now that we've gotten substantially off
If you
track.
can't already tell, this is going to be a slightly different episode.
Yeah. Okay, so we're already off track. So we're going to do this episode. I've been getting a lot of positive responses from the blogs. And one thing that people have been asking me is to go back and go over the blogs and kind of, take them, analyze them, and push them back out to you guys in the podcast format so that you can hear what thought processes and things were going through my head as we were writing them. And then obviously, what RJ's thoughts are on some of the concepts that we go over in the blog. So I'm going to start this off by actually reading. So I just got this text probably 2 weeks ago. And so here's the text. It's from my friend Katie. She says, anyway, I just read a big chunk of your blogs, and I have a lot of stuff going on in my life right now, but they somehow made me feel better, almost like I'm a little bit more centered and able to process my thoughts a little bit easier. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm hoping that people are getting out of these, blogs. It's not some crazy, ethereal, philosophical idea that I want you to sit down and have to stare at a wall for 6 hours to even begin to understand. It's stuff that you should be able to practically apply in your daily lives to make your lives easier. Or if you're going through hard times, give you a little bit of light at the end of, whatever that tunnel may look like for you. So this episode, we're going to go over the very first blog I ever wrote called The Swiss Army Knife. And I actually wrote this blog as a trial. This was the first thing that I ever wrote for JJD, period. Before JJD was ever the Apex podcast, before it was, this was JJD when it was just I'm going to start a Facebook blog. I just actually got a time hop notification that it was a year and a half ago that we started this. So this blog was written back when JJD was just a twinkle in my eye before any of this actually came to fruition. So we'll go straight to the blog.
Yeah, read it to me.
Yeah, we know that you have issues with that, so I'll be the
read it to me.
be the one reading. Okay, so to everyone chasing their apex, we're in the blog now. How many times have you been trying to get something done, grinding, grunting, having your head down, running forward, and going against the grain, when out of nowhere, someone appears and points out one tiny detail, and all of a sudden, your world becomes exponentially easier to manage, and the task is completed in a fraction of the time? How many times have you been asked to go find something and can't find it no matter how hard you look, and then somebody comes into the room and points out where it was? Right in front of your face. Many times, people get so caught up in a process that they lose sight of all the tools at their advantage. Today, I sat and I had a conversation with a former Army captain and current Air Force captain in my unit. When I asked him what his least favorite quality was in a young officer, he answered me with, "I hate when people have to operate with surgical precision and fall apart when things don't go to plan." I was honestly intrigued by this. Shouldn't the military be focused on being precise? He went on to explain that many times a surgeon has the best possible equipment, the top team, and optimal conditions to operate. If that surgeon was placed in the same environment but outside of their comfort zone with minimal equipment, a half-assed team, and horrible conditions, would they be just as effective? Or would they fall apart? Be a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife has endless amounts of tools and is adaptable to every situation. It is small, yet of an invaluable use in dire situations. You can always count on a Swiss Army knife. If you were going to try and survive on a desert island, would you want a scalpel that its only use is cutting? Or would you want a Swiss Army knife that has a screwdriver, a mini saw, pliers, and a blade all in one package? Sometimes it isn't about having all of the fancy equipment. It's all about being adaptable, flexible, and ready to complete a task no matter the odds. Now you may be wondering, what the hell does a knife have to do with me? Well, let me explain. When you're leading an organization towards a designated task, you may not always have the best equipment, the most motivated team, or the most optimal conditions. Equipment breaks, people quit, or don't show up, and sometimes shit just all around hits the fan. When that shit hits the fan, don't just give up. Fail, and then point the failure at all of your surroundings. That's a cop-out and a cheap exit. You will lose the respect of your team. Take ownership of the situation regardless of how hopeless it seems. Gut up, motivate your team, and conquer that shit. Get down in the mud with your team and grind. Ask your team members for input on how to move forward, compile it, and execute it. Involve them in the process and explain to them why it's important to do what you have to do. Trust in your abilities to lead. Tomorrow is going to come, regardless of whether you decide to lie down or charge forward. So when that sun rises tomorrow, will your team look at you and say, "Damn, that sucked. But that leader pushed us to accomplish the task, and we're proud of that"? Or will they say, "I can't believe we're here, and how lazy this guy is"? Your attitude will, I emphasize, will permeate through your team. The way that you handle adversity will dictate exactly how your team does. It's easy to complete tasks and look good when you have the best resources available, like a surgeon and his scalpel. So what are you going to do when everything hits the fan and you need that Swiss Army knife? The end. That is all. Thank you. I'll be here for the rest of the episodes. So that was the very first post I ever wrote. And actually, the gentleman that I interviewed when I wasn't even interviewing him. I just kind of heard this by happenstance, and this is like how life has happened thus far with these posts and some of the episodes and everything else. Like, people keep asking me, where do you get ideas for this? Where do you get... And I just talked to somebody the other day that wants to start her own podcast. And she was like, what do I need to do? To help develop my idea, what do I need to do?
Find a sick co-host.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, what? No, that's not one of them?
But I told her, like, before you find a sick co-host, you have to look at everything in your life through the lens of the content that you want to produce. So, like, when I first had this idea for the Apex and JJD, I started looking at all of the interactions that I was having on a daily basis through the lens of, like, the apex being my eyes. So like every conversation I was having, how can this be applied to leadership? Every interaction I was having with people, how can this be applied to what my content is going to be? So I was actually interviewing for a lieutenant slot at a base, right? And this captain was sitting across from me. He's out now. So his name's Captain Howard. So he was, a former Army, and then he was an Air Force captain when he got out. So I was sitting across from him, and I was like, you've been in for a while, multiple branches. I was like, what advice would you have to offer me as far as coming in if I were to get this position as a young officer? He's like, don't be a scalpel. You have to be a Swiss Army knife. He's like, I hate it when people have to operate with this surgical precision because they think that everything has to be perfect. And instantly that like triggered in my head. I was like, oh, this would be a cool concept to write about. But it just happened, if I hadn't been thinking about that conversation could have just went by the wayside.
In one ear and out the other.
Right. Because it was just, like a little interview kind of thing that we were going through. So let's go back and we'll kind of, start dissecting this. Okay, so how many times have you been trying to get something done, grinding, head down, running forward, feel like you're going against the grain, and like all of a sudden out of nowhere someone comes in and is like, hey, if you would just do this, this would make your life 1,000 times easier. And then you start doing it and you're like, oh my God, like I've been doing this like
that happened to us here.
So hard for so long and this is so much easier.
When we came in to record the first episode of 2019.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We're farting around with trying to get the mics work, and our editor and whatnot comes in and literally flips one switch. He's like, "Here you go."
Yeah,
he drove all the way out here when. Was he on?
He was on a date.
Yeah,
he was on a date with his girlfriend.
We're like, dude, we need your help.
That's the commitment right there that we have from our team here at the Apex. It's like our producer, Mr. Jacob Popio, drove all the way out from Hartville, which, for those of you that don't know the area, is about 25 minutes from where I live. So he drove all the way out with his girlfriend and to flip one switch because I was too stupid.
We both couldn't figure it out.
Oh my gosh. That was so frustrating. Like I had everything hooked up, everything was in line. I'm like, okay, I'm just Googling things, trying to figure out like what's going wrong, looking at like tutorials, and I was like, I don't know. I'm at a loss. He comes in, whoop.
He's like, there you go. Now can I get back to my date?
Oh my gosh. So those are the kinds of things where it's like,
sometimes you gotta take a step back.
If I were too stubborn to ask for help,
we would have never
in that situation, we would have never been able to record that episode. And sometimes people get locked into stuff like that. Like, I don't need help.
It's easy to get so focused in on something that you can't step back and look at it from a different perspective and notice a switch on the back of a box.
I just took a bite of muffin, so give me a second.
I'm just going to let the silence go. If you choose to take a bite, that's your own fault.
That's fair. So we'll move on to the next line here. And it's exponentially easier to manage a task and complete it if you're willing to ask for help. Okay. So this second part of that paragraph says, how many times have you been asked to go find something and can't find it no matter how hard you look? And someone else from an outside perspective looks in and it's like, dude, it's right there. This used to happen to me all the time as a kid with my dad in the garage because he had it arranged how he wanted it to be arranged. And he would be like, hey, go find this gas can. I'd be like, Dad, it's not in there. I don't know where it's at. He'd be like, you find it, it's right there.
I'm under the car.
Yeah. And he's like, it's behind like a barrel. Tucked up against the wall. And he's like, didn't you know it was right here? It's like, no, I didn't know it was right there. It's hidden. It's not in plain sight. You just said it like, oh, like I'm going to walk in. It's going to be blatantly sitting right there on the floor, not tucked away on a shelf. But like the way, what I was trying to relate this to is like you could be doing a task or like you said, someone gets so focused in on something that they think that they're, accomplishing a bunch of stuff. Or they think that they're really pushing, but they can't seem to find fulfillment in what they're doing. and somebody, 10 feet away is looking at them like,
They should be doing this.
you should be doing this. It'd be like me standing with my nose right up against a wall and you standing 5 feet behind me going, dude, the door is like
Right there, brother.
two steps to your right. Just, move over a little bit, grab the handle. But internally, if I took the time to take that step, go a couple of feet back, I could see that door. But it's really hard for people to
Step back.
to take a step back from their own,
Process.
their own intention. Okay. So that's our first paragraph there. And so we already kind of just hit this. So this says many times people get so caught up in a process that they lose sight of all the tools at their advantage. And that's essentially the same.
I feel like that happens a lot in the gym. Like personally for me,
How do you figure?
like literal tools, you get into a rhythm. Like I get into a rhythm where like over a month period, I end up doing the same exercises week in, week out. And then somebody will come in and be like, hey, why don't we you do this machine for shoulders or this machine for legs or something like that. I end up waking up the next morning sore than I have been in the last 6 months. And I'm like, oh, all I did was,
One
did
different
cable
exercise.
flies instead of flat bench flies or stuff like that. And I think it's the same thing with other stuff, like even with school, like with my girlfriend being in grad school right now, she studies the same way all the time, just sits and reads and, whatnot. So every once in a while, like I'll go in and help her and be like, this is how I studied when I was in school and whatnot. And these are the things that and nothing, I don't think any different than, a teacher tries to help you. Like, hey, do this little dance, remember, this acronym or whatever to remember the information. But several times
Just adding a tool to your tool bag. Yeah.
Yeah, and several times I've gone and said, if this is what you're learning, Steph, then if I were to be the one that had to take a test on this on Thursday, this is how I remember it. And she'll message me or call me or I'll talk to her that night after the test and she'll be like, actually, because it wasn't something that I would normally, teach myself to study, I actually remembered it a lot more. Because
Yeah.
it came from
That's like-
someone else.
Right. Or like my dad always said too, like it's the questions that you get wrong that you remember because it's something that was outside of your
Perception.
that you didn't know.
Yeah.
So he tells a story all the time. I don't even know what the answer is, but he was really into Greek mythology as a kid,
As was I.
and they were competing at a state trivia competition. And he got a question wrong, and to this day he can tell you the question and the answer.
Bent.
He's 64 years old.
Bent like a coat hanger.
Yeah, I mean it was he may be holding a slight grudge against the fact
Slightly.
that he didn't remember.
Yeah,
that.
just stuff you get in such a groove that
It starts to feel comfortable.
Well, your brain nonchalantly doesn't even have to think about it anymore. Thus, you don't think about it, and it's not something consciously floating around in your head that you should maybe make a difference. But you're like for me, I'll go in the gym and be like, well, it was a good workout and whatnot, and then I was like, oh, well, it was a good workout last week. Let's do it again this week. Let's do the same exercise the week after, the week
Right.
after that, and then all of a sudden
It's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
then all of a sudden it's like, why am I not getting sore? Why am I not feeling as good after these workouts? Why don't I feel like I
As
busted my
accomplished or
my butt?
Yeah.
And then some linking up with a couple other people like Ryan who would jump in on some of my workouts. I'll do his workout for the day. I'm like, good God, I am sore.
Right. Yeah, and so I mean that's a really good thing to be able to be aware of. Where if you know that you tend to fall into these rhythms, to be like, okay, hey, it's been about a month.
Time to switch it up.
Am I in a rhythm, or am I aware of the fact that I'm might be stagnating? Do I need to switch something up? Do I need to add something else in? And sometimes, honestly, it can be taking something out to relieve a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So the next part here, we talked to the Army captain for a little bit. We talked to Captain Howard. So then the bottom of this paragraph, I was really intrigued by the fact that he had said that. So back to the blog. Shouldn't the military be focused on being precise? He went on to explain that many times a surgeon has the best equipment available, the top team, and optimal conditions to operate. If that surgeon were placed in an environment outside of their comfort zone with minimal equipment, half-assed team, and horrible conditions, would they be just as effective, or would they fall apart? And that's a question that I like to ask people, where I'm saying people will complain all the time. We're like, well, this happened because of pointing the finger at the computer system was down, or pointing the finger and be like, I didn't have this resource that I normally have, and so I wasn't able to get the job done. Like, my protein came in late, and so I didn't get my macros for the day because I didn't have my shake. There's always a way, regardless of what career field you're in, regardless of what profession, that you can point at something externally and say, it's that thing's
their fault.
That I didn't get something done. And what I think is really dumb, and I do this all the time, and I catch myself doing it all the time, and it agitates me that I still do this, is that, like, inanimate objects are inanimate objects. They don't have feelings. They can't talk. You know what I mean? Move. They can't think or move. And you're like, that inanimate object's the reason why I didn't get something done.
Ruined my day.
Right. And it's like, really? You're the one that has this brain that we don't even fully understand because it's so, like, powerful. And you're pointing at,
the chair you stub your toe on.
Exactly. You're like, dang. Like, why did that chair jump out in front of my pinky toe?
Yeah.
Really?
I think a lot of people do that kind of stuff, though.
I mean, they do. That's what I'm saying. Like, I do that all the time, too. But it's, why is that our natural tendency to point at, like, I don't know, if you, like, say we're relating it to the gym.
It's a part of not wanting to, be at fault or take blame for something. I don't think anybody wants to do that. Yeah, it's super hard to admit that you're taking fault for something. And a lot of people think, they're like, well, if I admit to this, then I'm going to lose respect from people. I think nowadays a lot of people respect it more if you actually are just upfront with the situation.
Genuine
first.
with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that culture shift has been happening for probably the last 5 years or so.
I'd say so.
We're kind of shifting back towards the, not like the Instagram lens kind of thing that people talk about, where everything on Instagram is happy-go-lucky and everybody's life is perfect, and it's like causing depression because people see this and they think that that's what their life should be, no issues kind of thing. But I think it is, like you said, starting to switch back to where...
If 21 Savage had just said he was from Britain and didn't pretend to be from Atlanta, I don't think anybody'd be mad.
Oh, my God. That was a big thing, wasn't it?
Kerfuffle.
Yeah, I don't really pay attention to that kind of stuff, but I saw stuff
when I was at Akron doing sport management and whatnot, they basically said, like, any situation, like if you're managing any type of team, whether it sport related, especially if it's more sport related because you have personalities and celebrities when it comes to that kind of stuff, whether it's like a local celebrity or Baker Mayfield for the Browns and whatnot, stuff like that, that you're better off just heading the situation before news breaks anywhere else and taking full responsibility before, rumors start and other news outlets or someone else comes out with the information. And I mean, it's shown kind of time and time again, especially with the, the examples that they gave us and, with, recent news and stuff happening, that it's just better to come forward and, take responsibility for what you've done, whether you that you did or you didn't know, but in the end you're like, oh crap, like this is my fault. It pays off way more in the end than trying to deny it or pretend like your hands weren't in it.
Right. And so the other concept with this line here is that everybody always wants not just the best equipment but the best team and the optimal conditions and everything else. And I see this all the time with people that want to go to the gym or people that are trying to get healthy or people that are trying to push themselves in a new direction, where it's like, I'm not going to start this until March because in March, I won't have as much work. I won't have to do this. I won't have to do that. And then March comes around and it's the same, like boom, 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 boom. And it's like, okay, on Monday, even if you go to the, say you wake up, you get 50 crunches in, 20 push-ups, you're able to run for 10 minutes, and that's all you're able to do.
It's better than nothing.
That's still better than nothing. If you, like, there's been times where I haven't been able to go to the gym before I go to work at the hospital. You bust out some push-ups, some burpees, you know, and some air squats, good. That's, you know, you do one set of 100 of each of those. You do 100 burpees, you're going to want to vomit. But, like, you do anything, it gets your blood flowing, your brain is clear. My friend from Tennessee just hit me up and was like, dude, I started working out again. He was like, it's weird how I feel like I can think more clearly. I'm like, yeah, that's weird because...
Your body's up and moving.
Right, it's moving, blood's flowing, you're increasing your endorphins, there's all this other kind of stuff going on. And I actually just, you know, talked to my friend that's thinking about taking a year off of school, and she was like, these aren't the optimal conditions. I mean, I don't want to have to do this. I was like, okay, well, what are you going to do in that time off
that you're not in
to
school.
continue to push yourself? Because she's trying to get a full-time job at FedEx where she's currently an intern, and, you know, long-term, it would probably be a benefit, you know, but society looks at taking a year off of school as, like, bad juju.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, people are telling me not to do it. These aren't necessarily the conditions that I want to do it under. You know, am I going to be able to maintain a good relationship with the school, all this other kind of stuff? And I was like, if you had 5 seconds to decide, what would you do? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She was like, take the job. I was like, okay, well, if that's where your gut is leading you,
Then do it.
then you need to follow it.
Yeah.
Be a Swiss Army knife. Adapt to the situation. Okay. So we'll move on to the next paragraph here. And that's perfect. I said be a Swiss Army knife. It's opening line. It's almost like
Nice.
It's almost like I read the blog
you wrote
once
it.
or twice. So here's back to the blog. Be a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife has an endless amount of tools and is adaptable to every situation. It is small, yet of invaluable use in dire situations. You can always count on a Swiss Army knife. And if you were going to try and survive on a desert island, would you want a scalpel whose only use is cutting, or a Swiss Army knife that has a screwdriver, mini saw, pliers, and a blade? Sometimes it's not about having all the fancy equipment. It's about being adaptable and ready to complete the task. So I'm actually curious about what your thought process is on that, because I feel like, especially in your arena with bodybuilding and stuff, people... like, you have a different approach to it. You know what I mean? Most of the people I know are counting the rice grain down to the single grain of rice, and the workouts are so specific and everything else. But once I started kind of diving into your guys' world, like when you put me through that regimen, I started actually watching and paying attention. That's not how everybody does it by any means. So do you see a difference between the people that look at themselves like Swiss Army knives versus the people that are like scalpels? Or is there a time where you have to be one or the other?
Okay, that's a fair question. So the people who you're saying are being scalpelish when it comes to, you know, my expertise in bodybuilding and the gym and that kind of stuff, those are the people that you literally see ripped out of their mind 24/7, 365. And to me personally, those are the people that are also burning out the quickest. You see a 4-year, 5-year stint where they do 7 shows a year, blah, 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 this and that. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, they're in good shape, but I think they quit working out. And they definitely don't compete anymore. I mean, I started bodybuilding and stuff like that when right around when I was 19, 20 years old and whatnot, working at GNC and just kind of, and full well knowing that none of the professionals, like at that time, because I was obviously, you know, in the mindset, like I want to be a professional bodybuilder, that none of those guys that were standing up there winning the Olympia were a day under 30 years old. And then, you know, you go through one, you know, prep, and you're like, in like you asked me, when is there a time to be a scalpel? Yes, there absolutely is, and that's when you're prepping for a show.
Right.
And I do. I focus, I lens and focus myself down to that scalpel when I'm getting ready for a show. But to do that year round, all the time, I don't think I'd be able to do it. I mean, it's so mentally exhausting to have to sit there and worry about how much I eat here down to the exact number, how many carbs do I have, how many sugars did I have, how many fats do I have, how many proteins have I had in the last hour, and then to do it again the next 2 hours when I eat, and then 7, 8 times a day every time I eat. It's terrible.
Right.
It would be abysmal. I don't think I mean, I pay close attention to stuff. Like, it's not like I'm just willy-nilly eating anything that I want. I have a generic idea, and I give myself, like, ranges. Anytime I help a client or, like, train somebody or someone asks me for advice, I give them ranges. Now, when I move someone into, quality of life lifting into I'm getting ready for a show, there are no ranges.
Right.
It's this or below.
Right.
And you don't go over that. So yeah, there's definitely a time and a place where you kind of have to
Switch that
yeah,
mode.
Yeah, exactly, and become the scalpel. But for most of it, if you're just doing quality of life, it should never be. I mean, unless. But see, that's the thing too. People are like, well, you can't be lax like that. I was like, you can. It's just. I'm looking at it as, as when I was 19 years old, that, I have 10, 11 years before my body is even matured to the point where I can compete with people.
Right.
On that level. So why sit here and do 8 shows a year and emaciate myself and get down to 3% body fat and all this kind of stuff if my body's not even genetically aged to the point that I can compete with some of these guys who just have, 30, 35, 40-year-old bodies that have been grizzled over 20 years of exercise.
Right.
So to me, it's like, okay, I'll do my ranges of protein, I'll do my ranges of carbs, I'll do my ranges of fats, and, I'll stay within the parameters that I've set for myself. So that's, whether a coach tells me they want me around this certain weight or just myself as in looking at myself in the mirror and being like, I look good and I'm happy with where I stand looking at myself in the mirror.
Right.
Ranges. And that's how I work off of. And like you said, but that's the thing is a lot of people get this kind of misconstrued concept of like what it takes to be a bodybuilder and compete and that kind of stuff because they're looking at, Instagram models and people who main focus is on Instagram and
right.
Like the one time we went to the Arnold when I worked a booth down there a couple years ago, we went and lifted at one of the gyms after like the opening day of the Arnold. There were guys there that they were a set of blonde twins. That was a fitness account. I don't remember their name. They look absolutely nothing like they do on their pictures.
Right.
Because I saw the pictures that they were taken, and then 2 days later saw them put up on Instagram, the same picture that I sat there and watched them take, and I took a picture on my phone. And I was half tempted to go on Twitter and just blow them to smithereens.
Right.
Because they were 100% edited and this and that. And there are some people who are on Instagram and stuff like that just dialed in at all times, but that's their life. They're not, and I might be wording it wrong, and this isn't 100% the case for every person that you see on Instagram, but my end goal is to become a professional. Their end goal is to make money off their social media.
Right.
So I'm not posting pictures of my abs and tanned up and, oiled down and flexing in the mirror all the time. But they physically have to be in that shape. And then other people see those pictures like, well, I got to be super strict year round if I want to look at like, no, you don't have to be. Be comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah, be comfortable with who you are.
Good parameters for yourself.
Right. And that's a big thing, too, I think, with just Instagram in general or people's mentalities in general, where it's like we talked about earlier, that idea is starting to shift where people are like, well, we want you to be more real with, the human to human interaction is becoming big, which is a big thing why the Apex kind of started was just, focusing on human
I get so much respect at
interaction
the gym from some people because I look like a wildebeest. I'm Polish and I'm probably one of the hairiest MFers you guys will ever meet in your entire life. And some people look at me at the gym and they're like, don't you like bodybuilding? I was like, just because I have a human-made sweater on underneath my shirt doesn't mean that I'm not a bodybuilder.
He's not joking either.
But it's like, it's not comfortable for me to, walk around and, go through $60 of razors just to shave my shoulders. It's just not. So I'm like, I don't care if other people don't like it. I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah, this is
and
me.
I'll walk around and someone will call animal control on me at the gym. I don't know.
Well, and you have that ability to just to rock it out. You know what I mean? And that's what I wish that people, that more people had the ability to be confident in themselves, because the big thing is that every single person has talents and things that other people do not possess.
Yeah. But see, back to the concept of the Swiss Army knife, if you're trying to fit into a mold of something that's socially acceptable, you're basically making yourself a scalpel.
Yeah.
Something that...
Yeah, you're focusing yourself so far down.
Yeah, and when honestly, even more than just bodybuilding, when you were reading the blog post, the main thing that came to me is... I guess my number one trait, and obviously you've seen this in me asking me to be the co-host on the Apex, is the fact that I have really good interpersonal skills. And I equate a lot of that to that my personality is like a Swiss Army knife.
Right.
I'm a bodybuilder. I am extremely nerdy. I build my own computers. I like to cook. I like to bake. I like cartoons. Kind of like to read manga. I've made my personality and my interests so much like a Swiss Army knife that I usually, very, very rarely, ever feel uncomfortable talking to anyone in any situation about anything.
Right.
And I think that's what makes me a good personality, especially on here. So when you're talking about being a Swiss Army knife, there's...
I've never really thought about applying that to personality.
Yeah, that's how I took it.
Because some people can take that...
There's some people who only mesh with certain people.
Right. So here, let's move on to the next section of the blog, because I think that this is an idea that will actually mold well down here. So we'll skip here, and it says, equipment breaks, people quit or don't show up, and sometimes, it just hits the fan. So when stuff starts to hit the fan, you can't just give up, fail, and then point the failure at your external, surroundings, because I call people out and I'm like, that's a cop-out. That's cheap. It's like, you're going to lose respect of your team. So unless you start to take ownership of the situation, regardless of how hopeless it seems, gut up, motivate your team, get down in the mud with your team and grind, and then, you have to trust your abilities to lead. So with the Swiss Army knife, as far as personalities go, a lot of people can look at that statement, right? And there's two different ways that you can say that statement. There's the one where it's like me and you right now saying that having a Swiss Army knife personality type is a good thing. Some people are like, hey, you're different when you're with this person versus with this person. You're fake.
But I've gotten that quite a bit. I you act differently about your friends. You act differently around your family. Yeah, I do, because I'm able to adapt to those situations. Not that I'm being fake
you have
to
be
myself.
empathetic to the audience that you're around.
Exactly.
I'm not going to. ICU nurses and military. My sense of humor is dark. It can be rough sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would never crack some of the jokes that I've cracked,
at church
in front of my mom or my pastor.
Yeah.
I'm like, Lord, forgive me for the joke that I just made, kind of thing.
You knew it was bad coming out.
Right, exactly. And it's like, that doesn't make me a horrible human, because, I'm obviously being sarcastic. I don't really mean some of those things, but it's a way for us to cope. As nurses together, we understand each other. But if I can't make that joke at the dinner table.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So you have to adapt and empathize with the audience you're around, because you're like, my mom would not appreciate this, neither would my sister or my dad. Or if you're leading a group of people and you're leading a bunch of type A personalities, you're going to do that way different than as if you were leading a bunch of type B personalities. It's not being fake. You're just switching up, what you need to get
connect with the people that you're around.
Exactly, and to get the most positive outcome out of those people.
Yeah. And some people, I mean, and I can see why, like you just said, if you spend most of your time with, like, for example, I don't have this problem with Stephanie, but me and her both kind of adapt to the situations that we're in. So it's good. Like, when we're just hanging out on our own, we're our own way with each other, and then we're with her group of friends or we're with my group of friends. We always just kind of fit in. Me and her have never had a problem with inviting anybody over or going certain places with certain people. Or
Yeah, you guys have like
that.
the most diverse
Group of friends,
friend group
yeah,
that I think
incredible.
I've ever encountered, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like the first time that I remember coming over for a game night, you know, and meeting
people from
Brock and meeting Noodles. What is Noodles' real name, by the way?
Ian Cameron.
Okay,
but
yeah.
no, everybody just absolutely never call him that. It's Noodles. If you know who I'm talking about, always call him Noodles till the day he dies.
I've never known him as anything else. Like
Yeah,
I didn't
exactly.
know his
I told
real.
him that his own kids will call him Noodles. I'll make sure of it.
I didn't know
He was actually
his real name
He's
for a
actually
while.
was looking to get a job at like a staff job at Glen Oak High School.
Yeah.
And I know a teacher there. And I said, I will pay you to make his name badge say like Noodles on it and have all the kids call him Noodles. And I was like, I do not care. I was like, I'll pay good money. I was like, he's never going to outlive that name. I promise you. He hates me. He's my best friend, but he hates me.
That's funny.
But yeah, like you go to one of our game nights. I have Ian Noodles, my best friend from high school. Then I have my one friend, Black Xavier, that I know from college. White Xavier I know from the gym. White Xavier's younger brother, Brock, who I know just from playing video games. We have you, who I know through Steph from school. Have my sister's boyfriend. So, and the linchpin is literally like me and Steph.
Yeah.
Because we're not afraid to talk and have friends from other people. But I was like, pretty sure one time I sat there in the middle of the room and go, you guys know you all wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for me.
Right. Well, because like I said, that your ability to, it's almost like not a personality chameleon, because that makes it sound like you're trying to disguise something. But
No, but
you're the
it just-
personality Swiss Army knife. You know, I have absolutely no idea what you and Brock talk about when you go off on these tangents about anime and video games and stuff. But Brock also looks at me with a blank face when I start talking about some of the
Business and
concepts that I start talking
yeah.
about. And so it's, you know, people with vastly different interests.
But see, I've always enjoyed, oddly enough, learning about other people's interests, even if it doesn't interest me. What interests me is why it interests you.
Expand on that.
Like, I've always liked talking, if you can't tell by now. No way. And I've always enjoyed interpersonal communication like that, you know, getting to know somebody, you know, figuring out what makes them tick. So, like, when someone comes to me and they're like, I literally in my head, I kind of think like to myself, pitch it to me. What are you saying in this conversation that should get me interested in what you're talking about as much as you are invested and interested in it? So, and then when someone starts talking like, hey, this show is great. Like, I understand, like, you don't like non-action-y cartoons or something like that, but, you know, the story was great, the animation itself, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm in there like, okay, maybe tonight before bed or something, or while I'm eating dinner, I'll check it out. And then while I'm watching what they're talking about, I'm thinking back to why they said it was good and why they liked it. I'm like, oh, damn, not too bad. It's not something I would, you know, scroll through my list on Netflix and pick out myself. But since you said something about it and you were so passionate about it, I'll give it a try.
Boom. That's where it is right there. People are more likely to follow you regardless of what it is, whether it's watching a TV show or whatever else, if they can feel and see that you're passionate about whatever it is. You know, and people think that you have to be like these big overarching ideas where you're like Braveheart, you know, like we're going to charge because I'm passionate about this freedom.
Yeah.
But it's not, it could be a TV show.
Yeah.
You know, there's different levels of it where it's like, you know, I really like this TV show. Here's X, Y, and Z reasons why. And I'm passionate about it because I think that it's good production. I want other people to watch it and enjoy it. And then it takes a lot though, and this is something that, I mean, obviously you're good at this point, to take that person's word for it more so and be like, humble yourself enough where you're like, oh, you know what? This isn't something that I generally would be interested in, but let's check it out. Because there's a lot of people that I know that are like, you're stupid. I don't want to check that out because
absolutely.
Your opinion of what you're passionate about doesn't matter to me. I'm so focused on what I'm passionate about that you should be passionate about what I'm passionate about.
I like that we touched on the personality. This brings to light a lot of stuff that, I mean, it is very good, like, in your own, physical space to be a Swiss Army knife, but I think just, with overarching concepts of kindness and stuff from our other podcasts, it's good to be, have the personality of a Swiss Army knife, too.
Yeah, and to make that a more positive connotation, you know what I mean? To make it a more positive concept, because like I said, a lot of people say that if you're a different person with different people, then you're not being real. But I think that as long as, like, if you're being down to earth with each one of those individuals, because I have a bunch of different interests too.
Well, it's not like I'm sitting there and pretending to like him. Like, yeah. Oh, wow, dude, sounds so cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. And then go home and be like,
that dude.
Screw that guy.
Right.
I just had to listen to him blab about something stupid. No, I listen to my best ability and, take their 2 cents into account.
Well, and like with me, like growing up in Canton South and then coming to Walsh or traveling and all the other places that I've been, I'm like, you get me in the middle of a field with a bunch of trucks parked in a circle around a bonfire, totally different type of Jan, than you would encounter in a suit at Walsh or at M-Bar.
Yeah.
Like, it's just different.
Yeah.
The situation is different, the people are different. And you're not, if you're being true to what your gut is feeling and what your heart and mind are telling you to do. Gary Vaynerchuk just talked about that not too long ago, where he was like, someone asked him why he cusses so much, and I know that this is the first episode that I've really kind of just let it fly with the blog because I'm not going to edit, what I wrote.
Yeah.
Like, I wrote that. I'm proud of what I wrote. I'm not going to not say it because I wrote it.
Too bad.
No, and we try to avoid cussing, just because I think it's bad taste.
I want you all to know I try really hard.
But for emphasis,
right?
Sometimes you can use that colorful language.
Absolutely.
And so Gary was saying that, like, in my head and in my heart, I don't want to tell you that something is, like, amazing. You're like, oh, that's great. He's like, I want to tell you that was awesome, effing awesome. You know what I mean?
It takes it a step above.
Right. And so he, like, is just like, if people want to give me crap for that, cool. But I'm not going to, like, my heart and my mind are telling me that that's the phrase that wants to come out of my mouth. I'm going to send it. And he's just 100% unfiltered. You know what I mean? Do I agree with that 100% of the time? Probably not. You know what I mean? But I do think that the overarching concept is good, where it's just stop filtering yourselves. Just send it. Just let
Full send.
Yeah, just let it happen. So this last, paragraph here says, tomorrow is going to come, regardless of whether you decide to lie down or charge forward. So when that sun rises tomorrow, will your team look back at you and say, damn, that sucked, but that leader pushed us to accomplish the task and we're proud of that? Or will they say, I can't believe we're here and how lazy this guy is? Your attitude will permeate through your team, and the way that you handle adversity will dictate how your team does. It's super easy to complete tasks and look good when you have best resources available. But what will you do when shit hits the fan and you need that Swiss Army knife? So I don't know. This whole, like we're talking about this personality, chameleon kind of thing, the Swiss Army knife personality. The final, like, piece to the puzzle, I think, is that people get so caught up in daily failures. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, like, they slip up on a day. And whether this is with, this has happened to me a couple of times in the last month. Since we started in 2019 here, there's been a couple of days where I had all of these plans to get something accomplished.
It just doesn't happen.
And I just, something happened where all I did was, like, clean the apartment and lay on the couch, And sometimes those days hit, and it's really hard to discipline yourself to continue to move past those days.
Yeah, absolutely.
90% of my days are those productive days, but 10% of the time I get punched in the face because, you whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever else you're doing, you can get overwhelmed. Yeah, and so people, Like, if I were to lay on that couch and then wake up the next morning and be like, wow, I spent all day yesterday laying on the couch. I'm a piece of crap. I might as well be a piece of crap today because I was a piece of crap yesterday.
And then they just let it roll.
Then it just
compound.
snowballs downhill.
Yeah.
And so, like I say here in this last paragraph, tomorrow's going to happen regardless of whether you lie down or charge forward.
Yeah.
So when tomorrow comes, are you going to look back on yourself and be like, I laid down, or did you charge forward? And even if you did lay down the day prior, that doesn't mean you have to lay down the next day. You can push through that and make that day, okay. Then 2 days later, you're looking back and you're like, you know what? 2 days ago, I was down in the dumps. Yesterday, I had a phenomenal day. Today, I'm going to make it even better. And you just bounce right back up. But you can't let yourself just sit down in the abyss.
There. Yeah. I mean, that goes with the concept of, like to me, if that kind of day happens to me where it's like I just can't seem to get myself motivated to do anything, going to the gym, just kind of go through the paces, nothing where you really feel like you accomplished anything. Next day, yeah, it's really easy to wake up and be like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, what a horrible day it was yesterday. But I've always been someone who kind of looks at the glass half full, be like, I needed that day.
Right.
I needed that day to, mentally recover, physically recover, and just, have a little bit of me time to get my head back in the right space to, do what needs to be done and go above and beyond that the next day and the day after that. So to me, if you're able to, wake up and at least see something that came from that failure, whether it's, like you said, just being lazy or, for a day, or like, you do bad on the tests or something like that, you can look there and be like, well, now I know, like anytime I did bad on a test, to me, it was like, well, now I know what to look out for.
Right.
I know how to study for it. I know what the teacher's expecting. And that's like, this is literally something I just gone over with my girlfriend. I was like, I never once ever in my history of schooling did well on the first test of any class. I don't think not that I failed every first test, but I don't ever think it was, grade A 100% work like that I did on the first test of any class that I was ever in, because I didn't know what they were expecting. I didn't know what they expected of me to write, if it was extended response or how to study for it or how much time I should dedicate to studying for a test like that.
Right.
But then, once that initial, test was given to me, I was like, okay, I know what I need to do now. Yeah, it sucked. I might have got a D, C, possibly even actually, failed it. But now I know what to look out for. Next test, I know I need to spend this much time. The teacher's more emphasis on, multiple choice questions than, extended response. If it's extended response, they don't want 1-2 sentences. They want a fully fleshed concept down on the paper and, sign off on it on the end. So
right. Yeah, you can adapt to it.
Yeah, so as long as you can kind of look at, any type of, negative thing and draw out even the smallest positive out of it, that is, in my ideas, being, a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, and like I say right here, the way that you personally handle adversity dictates how your team does.
Yeah.
So like if you're at the head of...
And you're getting down, it's going to only trickle down.
Exactly. It's just going to bring the rest of the team down and everything like that. So, and a lot of times people think that, there's a very fine line between being falsely positive with a group of people and being real, but looking at it through a positive lens. And like you said with the failure, one of the ways that you can pitch that, because you don't want to be that leader, that guy, whether you're like... for me, like as a nurse, I'm talking to a patient and they ask me a legit question about, something that I can tell them inside of my scope of practice about where their family member is heading. I'm not going to be like sunshine and rainbows, because people can feel that that's fake.
Yeah.
But you can't be all doom and gloom either. We could be like, here's what I see. Here's what I've seen in the past. This is conversations that I may, think that you should start having. Could they recover? Possibly. Here's what would have to happen for that to happen. Here's where they're at. And painting a realistic picture. And you could look at it in a positive light where it's, this is where we are, and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to falsely give you hope. I'm not going to falsely blow positive vibes at you for no reason. But I'm also not going to say that it's the end of the world, because you have to try to at least plant the seeds. And if you're in some type of leadership position in a business, you don't land a contract, or you don't, something happens with a team member that they're being disciplined or whatever else.
Approach.
Yeah, you could be like, hey, okay, you failed. You messed up bad. Here's X, Y, and Z reasons why I probably maybe failed you a little bit. Here's what you did to contribute to the failure.
And now we
here's where we are. Here's where we could go. If you could prove yourself again, here's the positive side of it. Mm-hmm. If you continue to mess up, this is where your path is headed. And you can give them that choice. Mm-hmm. And then work with them, give them all the resources available. If you believe that they're a savable asset, say, hey, here's how I'm going to help you. We're going to move you in this direction. This is what I would like to see. Like, I would want you to handle this adversity as I'm handling it with you. And if you give them respect and the ability to, save themselves, if it's a person that truly wants to be there, they're probably going to take that opportunity to reprove themselves, and you'll have somebody working twice as hard for you. And if they continue to fail, you have to be able to understand as somebody that's above in the organization to cut ties.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've encountered that type of situation where, it's just not working out. We need to cut ties.
Yeah.
And it's not anything against the individual. It's just, you're not right in this time in this organization for this purpose.
Yeah. If the knife's not working, use the nail file. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're
using the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. Honestly, I was thinking about this while I don't even know if you could call it a Swiss Army knife at this point. It was pretty big, and my dad called it the Swiss Army kitchen.
The Swiss Army kitchen?
Full spoon, full fork, full knife, bottle opener, mini pair of scissors, nail file,
gosh.
crowbar, mini nail clippers. It was about the size of a cell phone, but it had a collapsible spoon, everything.
Holy cow.
So if you think of that, if you don't have one thing, tackle it with another. Maybe use the spoon next time instead of the knife.
Instead of the knife? Yeah. If you're trying to eat soup, guys.
Yeah.
The spoon is probably your better option.
Than the fork.
Yeah, unless it's like chicken and dumpling soup or something.
So add as many things to your Swiss Army knife.
Well, that's the end of the blog post there. Do you have anything outside of that personality? I've never really thought about that personality concept. I really like that. So I may explore that. You guys may see a post about that coming up.
I can contribute.
Because I like that idea a lot. So this is, kind of a structure that we're going to go with, because we don't want all of our podcasts to be interviews. I've been getting a lot of stuff from people where it's just, the interviews are awesome. We really love listening to the interviews. But sometimes they just would. The critiques that I've been getting is just, we just want to hear what you have to say about some of the stuff that you've written, because that blog
post.
There's a lot in there. Yeah, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of stuff that was going through my head. Obviously, RJ, totally blew my mind with this personality concept that I didn't even think about in here. And so there's a lot more within these blog posts that are contained that, if we talk about them in this format, can get more stuff out there. So one thing that I want to ask from you guys is that if you guys have any questions about any of the blog posts, to send them in. Like, if you read something and you have a question on it, DM the JJD Thoughts Instagram. Message
DM me.
Yeah, message RJ on Instagram. Message my personal one. You can, get us on Facebook.
We're looking for other avenues of content to bring you guys. Like, I know Jan's wanted to, possibly, besides starting this series of blog post recaps, possibly doing book reviews, or we've even dabbled with the idea of giving each other challenges.
Right.
Something that's out of my comfort zone, and then that Jan presents to me a month's time to do, like reading a book.
Yeah.
Or me presenting a challenge to Jan, and then at the end of the month, us both coming in or on 2 separate episodes, ask how those experiences were and what we thought about it. And like personally, I would love to do episodes of like Q&As. So if you guys have questions, flood us with them. Personal questions, like to us, that you want to know more about us, more personal questions relating to the company as a whole and like what we're doing, even if they're like personal questions that you guys want to ask for yourselves that you think we might be able to give you guys advice on. I mean, and that could be anything from, life
You got
stuff
stuff
to,
going on in your life,
hey,
or-
what video game or book are you reading right now that you would, recommend for someone who with similar interests?
Right.
So, and I'd love to do, 30, 35, 40-minute videos just answering questions. And believe me, we'll do our best to, get to everybody's.
Yeah. And if the beautiful thing about that is that that if you asked a question that either I or RJ personally read it, and we're going to be continuing to address them, like we said, as best as we can, trying to address every question on the podcast, or at least respond to you
Personally,
through
if it actually is something very personal,
Yeah.
like make sure you guys write in there that like, hey, like I am asking this question, but it's not exactly
Not something
something
we
that I
want on the
want
show.
showing up on the podcast or
Right.
for anybody else to read.
Right.
We're at the end of the day, we're here for you guys, either as entertainment or confidants or whatever you guys want. But we'll help
Exactly.
you to our best abilities.
Exactly. So with that, we're actually starting, here in February. We do have a Chase the Apex clothing line.
We got our hoodies on right
That's
now.
going to be coming. Yeah, me and
cold as
RJ
hell out
both. Yeah, both wore our Chase the Apex hoodies. So those hoodies are going to be available for purchase in March. Okay, but in order to be able to purchase those hoodies in March at a discounted rate, you have to become what we call an Apex Chaser. Okay, so the Apex Chaser is joining the JJD Thoughts family and making a personal commitment to yourself and to the Apex movement that you are going to push yourself on a daily basis to become better. And essentially, the way that you do that is you go to our Patreon page, which is www.patreon.com/the Apex Podcast. When you go there, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a big orange button. You just click on it. It says Become a Patron. And you can donate up like little as $1 a month up to $50 a month. You know what I mean? All you have to do in order to qualify to be able to buy the clothing at the exclusive release in March is the $1. I mean, just $1 a month. Be able to say, hey, like, I want to become an Apex Chaser. I'm making this commitment to join this type of movement, this positivity, all of these, interviews and the content. I want to push myself to chase my Apex. And those hoodies, T-shirts, I think we're doing a long sleeve tee and then a tank, are going to be available for purchase in March to those people who have considered themselves Apex Chasers. Now, the Patreon is just a monthly reoccurring donation. We get 90% of the donations that are given through Patreon, and Patreon is going to continue to grow. So we're really looking forward to Patreon becoming a way of communicating with you guys and being able to see how many of you decide that you want to join the Apex Chasers as a team.
They're really cool looking hoodies and shirts that we have. Absolutely in love with the logo and whatnot. And hopefully you guys, they feel great. Top tier material that they're made out of.
If you remember the episode with Mike Eversole, the CEO of Envision Clothing Company, we're partnered with them for this clothing line.
They're doing great work.
They're doing great work. So if you become an Apex Chaser, you'll have the ability to get 10% off both the Apex clothing and the Envision side clothing. And both
Bang for your buck.
Yep, and all of the purchases made through either side of those, a percentage of that comes back to the podcast to help us produce content, travel to get interviews, and everything else. Like me and RJ, the 25th of February here in 2019 are going to be traveling to Indianapolis to get an interview. And so your contributions will help fund things like that to be able to get high quality interviews with, bigger name individuals to allow us to give you guys good content. With that, do you have any final parting words?
No, I had fun. This was fun. We'd never done this type of podcast before. Or at least I haven't done this type of podcast before since I've come on as a co-host. It's all been, not that I don't like interviews, but I think I enjoy just sitting here and, spitballing back and forth quite a bit.
Yeah, and like I said, just a different format, a different way of
Make sure you guys
communicating.
let us know what you guys think, and if you have any critiques, we're always open for, suggestions.
Good stuff. All right, well, if you guys want to send in your questions, like we said, send them into RJ's Instagram, which is Doc Holiday 92. Doc Holiday 92 with it, at Doc Holiday 92. And then mine is just Jan, Jan, it looks like Jan, _Almasy, ALMASY on Instagram. Okay, so either one of those or the JJD Thoughts page. If you want to send your questions into those, that's probably your best bet. So with that, we will see you in 2 weeks. And a blog post next week will drop from the Spartans of Kindness blog with Mr. John Dietz. Have a great 2 weeks.
See you guys.